The narrative around Iowa State football this entire offseason has been that the offense is going to take a step back, that Rocco will regress without Higgins or Noel to throw to, effectively saying that Rocco is nobody without his top two wide receivers from last season. Anybody who's ever said that, thought that, or agreed with somebody else who thought that is just flat out wrong. And we're talking about why today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day, making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform, be sure to hit subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. We're going to start off today's episode talking about Rocco and why I think he will actually be better this upcoming season than last. What is kind of appearing to be a bit of an unpopular opinion, if you will, could be the reason Iowa State wins more games this season. I know, more, or at least is more successful. One of those two, I think, is inevitable for this team, which is kind of where we're going in the second segment. We're going to break down the Big 12 as a whole and some parity aspects of this league, which is what makes it so great. But where does Iowa State fit in there? And then finally, we'll round out today's episode talking about strength of schedule. It seems like something we've talked about a lot, but I do think it's very important as we get closer to the season. CBS ranked all of the teams in the Big 12 hardest to easiest schedule. Where does Iowa State fit in there? And where do I think that lands them as far as wins and losses? Spoiler alert, probably not going to be a whole lot different, but it is worth mentioning the teams ahead of and behind Iowa State. Can't wait to dive into all of that and more. But first, be sure to hit subscribe down below. It's completely free. I'll pause 1 sec. Thank you. Shout out to you for doing that. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Rocco here. Rocco has been a major topic of conversation really since the end of the Pop-Tart Bowl last year against Miami, for a lot of different reasons. One being that he is one of the best leaders, arguably in college football, but definitely on Iowa State's team, not only this year, but in a long time. It's been constant how much we're talking about Rocco as a leader. But the flip side of that coin, in not a positive way so much, is the conversation around what will this team be offensively, and obviously Rocco being at the head of that offense is roped in here this season without Higgins or Noel. I think they're going to be better. Let me tell you why. Really quickly, I don't think that losing Higgins and Noel, that's not a good thing, right? Those are two very good players, arguably the top wide receiver duo last season in college football. Obviously now both on the Houston Texans. Really cool story there. I don't think that that's a good thing, but it's like you got to find the silver lining somewhere. I think that there is actually some upside. And really what it comes down to is we've talked about the wide receivers. We've talked about the tight ends. We've talked about the running backs, how everyone's going to be incorporated into this passing game here. And I think that is the reason that Rocco will be better this season. Now, of course, you've got another year under your belt. You've seen more situations. You took a whole off season. You worked on this and this and this. You get better over time. That's what happens in athletics, or at least until a certain point. Some people older than others, but generally there is a fall off. For most sports, not all, but for most sports, there is a fall off where you just kind of really can't get a whole lot better year to year. In college, generally these players are getting better year to year. So yeah, Rocco's probably going to be a better player this season than he was last. But why? Specifically, why? I think it's because without those absolute bona fide top two wide receivers, Rocco will be forced to spread the rock around. And what does that mean? Well, with Rocco being forced to progress through his reads more, which he has talked about quite a bit this offseason, he won't feel the panic nearly as much. I think that Rocco and the offense as a whole last season had a lot of situations where they were like, well, we have to get it to Higgins or we have to get it to Noel on this play. And if the play breaks down, what now? There's a lot of question marks in that situation. Last season, Rocco going for 25 touchdowns at 9 interceptions. You'd like to see that interception number a little bit lower. You just would. Obviously, you'd like to see it at 0. And I believe he had more interception-worthy throws last season, just ended up with 9. So you'd like to see some more poise late in the play, as PFF was talking about earlier this week, and I broke down a little bit yesterday. I think that the fact that Rocco now will be working through reads more consistently throughout the season will result, it's like practice in games. We're talking about practice? Yeah, in a game where now Rocco, if the situation isn't ideal, is used to either way, is more accustomed to those situations and will be able to handle them better. You're going to have better accuracy, better understanding of the playbook, better understanding of defenses. Maybe he's not in any of those situations in the first place. Maybe he's able to read defenses better, get to the, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes level of what's going on the defensive side of the ball. And he just never finds himself in an awkward situation. Always knows exactly what to do, never gets late in the play. Maybe that happens. That'd be great. But if the play ever breaks down, if coverage, is really tight in the secondary and the line's kind of breaking down, Rocco extends the play with his legs. What now? Maybe instead of fitting it into tight windows, he's used to running through his progressions and surveying the field. Like I said, I think last season, I think that there was an element of we have to get it to Higgins, we have to get it to Noel, and as the play broke down, there was a lot more question mark. There was a lot of where am I going with this ball? This isn't usual. Like this is not what I'm usually doing. Now, of course, Rocco didn't only throw to Higgins or Noel last season. Definitely threw to other players. I think Brahmer really came onto the scene last season. Burkle really came onto the scene last season. To tight ends, of course, and there were other wide receivers as well. But really, it was kind of the Higgins and Noel show. And Paulie talked about it this week. Really, Noah Paulie, that is the coach at Iowa State, really talked about like that. There were plays where the target was Higgins or Noel. The play was designed for Higgins or Noel, and they have designed plays for everyone in the entire playbook. Like I get that on the entire team. That's how those plays are designed. That's what they're meant to do. But they were really leaning into their top two wide receivers. Makes complete sense. However, there is a downside to that. And I think that this season, we will see a more versatile offense as a result of not having two absolute top tier guys. We will also see more poise from Rocco. That's just how I see it. I don't know. If you disagree, you can let me know at Nick_Marv on Twitter or in the comment section down below. I read them all. I think that Rocco is going to take a major step forward this season. And what does that mean? More team success. Now, the defense has to perform, of course, and we've talked about the defense. We talked, I think, pretty much entirely about the defense yesterday, why I think that this team will be very, very solid on the defensive side of the ball. But you got to score points to win games, right? You can't win a game 0-0, to my knowledge. Pretty sure 0 is the same number as 0, which means that it's not more, which means it didn't win. Maybe not. I don't know. But can you tie? I don't know. But I'm pretty sure you have to score more points to win. That's just how sports work. So scoring points equals good. And then the defense has to do their job. I think Rocco gets it done. I don't see any way where Rocco takes a step back. And then what's the other option? He steps laterally, does the same thing he did last season. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's pretty rare to go exactly neutral. If he had the exact same stat line as last year, had the same, stats in certain circumstances, maybe you could call that a lateral move. Maybe. Arguably. Probably have to have the same win-loss record. It would be dicey. Be a nightmare for statisticians out there. It just would. So he's probably going to take a step forward or backward. More than likely. 99.9% chance. And I don't think it will be backward. Which by then, that logic, a 99% chance that he takes a step forward. That's math for you. I'm pretty sure. Does he have higher top-end talent? We're yet to see. But probably my guess would be no. But like I said, we don't know for sure. We do not know for sure. We could have a couple guys just blow up onto the scene this year. Sowell and Xavier Townsend could be absolute weapons. Eli Green, a guy to look out for. Brett Eskelson, a guy to look out for. Tight ends, wide receiver, or running backs. Who knows? Who knows? We don't know for sure that there won't be one guy who is significantly better, and maybe this whole idea just completely goes down the drain. But I think that without those guys that are at least now being planned in as like we're getting the ball to Higgins or Noel every single play, Rocco will be better at working through his reads because he'll be doing it all season, won't feel the pressure. That's just my opinion. Now, where does Iowa State finish in the Big 12? Well, first thing we have to do is look at the entire Big 12, and we got a very special analytics breakdown of where the Big 12 could land. We're talking about that coming up right here after this. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. When I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better. My energy, my mood, my focus, even my skin. But getting enough fluids every day isn't always easy. That's why I've been loving Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body fully absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. My go-to flavor right now is the lemon. It's like lemonade. I don't know. It's just personal favorite. Let me know what you think. But right now, we got to tell you, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code Locked On College. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Locked On College for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. All right, the Big 12 is known for being one of the highest parity leagues, and the Cyclones are a part of that. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I've got the Kelly Ford Twitter page up here. This is very interesting analytics wise. Now, I will say these are all projections. This is July for you. I mean, that's what this is. So take this with a grain of salt. But these numbers, I don't think are worth throwing away, which is why we're talking about them. I would like to start this little segment by comparing comparing the Big 12 to what is, I guess, considered by many the greatest, well, at least by some, the greatest conference in college football. I'm looking here at the Big 10. I just always laugh because I was in this. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have. So what this is the projection of each team to have more than a certain percentage of wins, or a specific percentage of wins in a year, or a percentage that they will get a certain number of wins. That is what I'm trying to say here. So for Ohio State, for example, we're starting in the Big 10. There is a 27% chance that they will achieve 9 wins this upcoming season, but it's more likely that they fall right between 7 and 8. They're averaging out closer to 8, but you never know, right? Their percentage to win 7 games is 91%. The reason I bring up the Big 10 is because they have 5 teams with a percentage greater than 10% that they will win 8 games, and they only have 8 teams that they will win 8 teams that will win 7 or more games by that 10% right there as well. When you get down to the Big 12, and there are relatively similar numbers, actually even worse for the SEC, really quick, for 7 wins, anyone in the SEC, there's only 4 teams that achieve higher than a 10% chance there. I know there's a lot of numbers here. You can go to Kelly Ford on Twitter to see these graphs for yourself. The Big 12 is loaded top to bottom. I mean, it's just a much wider graph. It's a much more like everyone's going to kind of eat here. And I think that makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about how this affects Iowa State here in a second. Every single team in the Big 12 has at least a 1% chance of being tied for second. What? That is how? Every single team has at least a 32% chance to win at least 4 conference games. That's a lot of games, low key. No team has better than a 32% chance to win at least 7 conference games. Okay, so what we're doing here is we are really scrunching this in between 7 and 4, essentially, is what we're kind of doing here. Now, to break down, the averages, Kansas State and Arizona State come out on top at 5.8 on average. Baylor 5.6, Texas Tech 5.4. We have to jump down to the 9th best team to find Iowa State at 4.8 average wins. We'll get into that here in a second. But effectively, we're seeing a much more narrow likelihood, or I guess much more narrow selection as far as what teams will end up with wins. We're probably going to have a much tighter race. It's where I'm going with this whole thing. Okay. It's going to be tougher because everyone's going to be right in there. You really can't drop one, even if you're at the front, because you're going to fall back a few spaces because everyone's right there. Good news is if you're at the back, you just got to keep winning, and it's more likely that you'll jump to the front. Makes a lot of sense to me. As far as Iowa State goes, this wasn't ideal. I'm not going to lie to you. Iowa State averaging out at 4.8 wins, has a 59% chance to win 5 conference games. Okay. Don't love that. That feels way, way, way too low. Now, I've talked about the ceiling for Iowa State, I believe, is probably 10 or 11 wins, and their floor is 8, in my opinion. So for them to achieve 8 wins, they need to win all of their non-conference games, and then they have a 59% chance of winning those 5 conference games per this model. I disagree with this entirely. You have to push it all the way to the left here. I'm just, kind of opening your eyes. For Iowa State to win 8 conference games, 3% chance. That feels so wildly low that it is just simply wrong. Just simply wrong. I don't see any way that is not the case. For 3%, I mean, obviously you're not going to have a 100% chance of winning 8 conference games, but looking at the schedule, Kansas State, okay. Arizona for sure. Cincinnati, yes. Colorado, I think, is a yes. I think that TCU, they get it done. It'll be a tough game. Kansas, yes. Oklahoma State, that's already 6. And then what are you left with? BYU, Arizona State, and K-State. You got to win 2 of those 3. You're telling me there's a 3% chance that they win 2 of those 3 games? That's kind of what you're telling me. Or that this is the most parity-driven league in the history of ever, which it kind of is. It kind of is. So that if obviously they don't win the games they're supposed to, they have to win all of those tough games. I get that. And BYU, obviously different without Retzloff, but will still be a good program, will still be a competent team, will still be a problem in the Big 12. They just will. It's going to be a tough game for Iowa State. I get that. But a 3% chance to win 8 games, that I would be very curious to know, like, how are they running these analytics? How is this being found out? And I apologize that this is a lot of numbers, and it's honestly like kind of hard to convey because there's so much going on this graph. And like I said, you can find this at K Ford Rankings on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. But a 37% chance or 32% chance, excuse me, for Iowa State to get 6 wins in conference. I don't love it. I don't love that percentage. I feel like that should be closer to like 40, 45%. I just think that I think that's really likely. I think that 32% feels wildly low. I just laid out an easy, in my opinion, 6 wins. If they drop one of those, you're telling me they're going to lose every single one of those kind of upper tier games in BYU, Arizona State, K-State? Like, probably not. Probably not. I think this is an absolutely loaded Iowa State team. I think this team has a ton of talent. There's no way they drop every single one of those games. I just don't see that happening, especially with, Arizona State going to be a very tough game, but playing at home. You tell me that doesn't matter at all? You tell me playing BYU at home doesn't matter at all? Would you rather play in Provo or in Ames? Probably in Ames. Pack the jack, right? I feel like I saw these numbers and I was like, why is Iowa State down at 9? I just don't get it. And this isn't an opinion per se. To my knowledge, this is an actual stat-driven like percentage. Can't really argue with that. But I just think that if this is the case, Iowa State is going to greatly exceed expectations. Greatly. I think they venture into at least the 8-win column. I think they do. In the conference, I think they can get that done. Now, of course, I think they'll get 8 wins on the season. I think they probably win all 3 of their non-conference games. Definitely 2 of them. And so then to achieve that 8-win threshold, you win 6 conference games. I don't see that being a problem. But I guess they only have a 32% chance of doing that. That feels really low. Let me know what you think down below or at Nick_Marv on Twitter. Like I said, you can find this at K Ford Ratings on Twitter or X if you would like to see the graph for yourself. Now it's time to pivot to strength of schedule because that's going to play a role. Obviously, it makes sense to piggyback off of where we're at with like how many wins. Strength of schedule going to play a large role. We're talking about that coming up right here after this. CBS Sports likes to do rankings. And here at Locked On Cyclones, I like to talk about them. It's July. we get to talk about this kind of stuff. It's kind of the time of year we're in. Shout out to you guys for making it to this point. We're gonna break down the strength of schedule based on CBS Sports. How hard is Iowa State's schedule in comparison to the other Big 12 teams? Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. It's completely free, and we're proving it's a Cyclone State. Let's start with the toughest schedule, Baylor. Okay, number 1. TCU 2, Utah 3, Kansas State 4, Colorado 5, West Virginia 6, Arizona State 7. Iowa State comes in per CBS at the 8th most difficult schedule. Arizona 9, Cincinnati 10, and then you got Oklahoma State, UCF, Kansas, Texas Tech, Houston, BYU rounding out the top 16, obviously the entire conference. What do I make of this? Well, in some ways, this is good news. For one, based on this rating only, right? If we take these numbers at face value and this is the end all be all, being at 8 is a pretty good spot to be in at the level of play that Iowa State is at right now. If Iowa State were the 16th worst team, or I guess that would be the 16th best team, right? The first best team would be the top, so the 16th best team would be the bottom. Whatever, the worst team in the Big 12. You wouldn't want to have the 8th hardest schedule. You just wouldn't. That's not where you want it to be. I think Iowa State's rating is higher, or ranking, I suppose, is higher than what their perceived schedule rating is by CBS Sports here. That's good news. I think Iowa State's in the top 4 or 5 in the Big 12, and with a schedule of 8th hardest, you're above that line. I think that's a great spot to be in. However, there are some teams that kind of scare me. BYU at 16, they can make some noise there. They can make some hay, right? Texas Tech, 14, could make some noise, right? Kansas has the opportunity to get on a little bit of a heater. We play them second to last game of the season. Kansas, going into that game, will be coming off a bye and play K-State, but it's a tough one, but Oklahoma State and Arizona. You win 2 games, you go into the bye, you got Iowa State. Granted, we're in Jack Trice, but you don't. It's not exactly where you want to be. I wouldn't say that's a great spot for Iowa State if Kansas is getting hot at the end of the season, maybe playing for a bowl game berth or whatever. So those are the ones that kind of stood out to me. At the top, I do think that Baylor having the toughest schedule is good news. Baylor could certainly make some noise this season. They have a very tough non-conference schedule. We haven't really talked about Baylor, but Auburn and SMU in there, and Arizona State, their 4th game of the season. They've got K-State. They've got TCU. They've got, at the end of the year, Utah could be a problem for them. They'll probably have a much easier second half of the year, in my opinion. But they start off with 6 straight games. 4 at least of those are going to be a major problem. And that's good. You want that to happen if you're an Iowa State fan. TCU in there at the top. TCU is a team to look out for, in my opinion. I genuinely believe that. UNC, SMU, Arizona State, Colorado could be a problem. K-State, they'll be on the road there. Baylor could be a good team. We'll see what happens where they're at record-wise. But that doesn't really affect how they're playing on the field any given night. Obviously, Iowa State in there, BYU at the end of the season. You just don't want to face a TCU who's getting real hot. Baylor, West Virginia, by Iowa State for TCU. That's another potential problem. If they're beat down by that time of the season, maybe they've only got 3-4 wins. They're at a negative win percentage. That's a good thing. You don't want them undefeated, unless maybe they're getting complacent at that point, which would be maybe a good thing. But you don't want them. You don't want them hot. That's for sure. Utah, not too worried about Utah overall. That's not one I necessarily circled. Kansas State, though, we obviously do our Farmageddon Friday breakdowns. Kansas State, that's one you want at the top. That's when you want to have a very tough schedule. I think that works in Iowa State's favor for sure, especially if they are to drop that game to Kansas State to start the year. There's a chance that if Kansas State drops a few, obviously you don't have the tiebreaker, but if they're able to drop one down below you because they have that harder schedule, it's not a problem that you lost that first game of the season. Now you have to do your part and pull your weight and win more games, but you could find yourself in a situation where you might lose the head-to-head, but then Kansas State can't keep it together for the rest of the season because they got the 4th hardest schedule in the Big 12 per CBS Sports. It's a very real possibility. Colorado at 5 there. That's a good thing. I think Colorado could be very good. West Virginia at 6. Now we're getting into that kind of middle ground. It's not ideal, but West Virginia, very much a wild card. So I would prefer them to be, higher. I guess I would rather every team have the hardest schedule, but that's impossible. Arizona State at 7, though, I do think is a problem. Just to be very candid, Arizona State looking to go back to back, returning an absurd amount of guys. You got Northern Arizona. They do have Mississippi State in here, but Texas State, Baylor, TCU, Utah, Texas Tech, Iowa State. They'll have Colorado at the end of the year. That's a deadly schedule. That is a schedule that Arizona State could get a lot of wins. And obviously, they're like I was just talking about those K Ford rankings, those Kelly Ford rankings. 1% chance to win 9 games, 10% chance to win 8 games. A 1 in 10 chance that they walk away with 8 wins in conference, which 8 wins in conference probably gets you to Dallas. Probably. I mean, more than likely, I would say. There's a chance they walk away with 8, a 1 in 10 chance. And then obviously for the year, that's more for the college football rankings, obviously where you're going to get seeded if you make the playoff. But with Northern Arizona and Texas State, they probably get those 2 as well. That puts them at 10 wins on the year. They beat Mississippi State. That's 11. That's a pretty strong resume. Now, it's probably good for the Big 12. It's not ideal for if you're trying to squeak in as that team that's like right on the edge, kind of like Iowa State was last year, like right on the edge. A couple things go their way, they make the Big 12 championship game. If you've got, teams like Arizona State up there with just running away with first place, now there's only one spot to fight for. And if hypothetically you lose to Kansas State, but the fourth hardest schedule plays a role, you've got them beat by just a little bit, but BYU's got the easiest schedule. They got a 1% chance to win 9 games. They have an 18% chance to win 7 games per this Kelly Ford, right? So Iowa State to win 7 games, 12% chance. I just don't, first off, I don't love that. There is not a large gap there. 12% feels way too low to me. That is not putting a lot of faith in the Cyclones. I personally have a ton of faith in the Cyclones. I think they're going to dominate this year. But boy, just to reiterate, Kelly Ford does not have a lot of faith in Iowa State. But yeah, looking at these, as far as CBS saying this is the hardest, this is the easiest, I think they got it pretty close to right. I think those guys at the top, they do have a tough schedule. They really do. I think Iowa State's kind of right in the middle. I think their buys work out really well. Their non-conference is relatively favorable. Rocco did say this is the hardest first 4 to start a season for Iowa State, maybe ever. That's a bold statement. I don't know about that. Obviously, Iowa is going to be tough. Always is. Probably shouldn't be. It's Iowa, but the record is what it is. I'm not going to fight the record. There was a period of time. Anyways, Kansas State overseas. That's going to be a tone setter for the season. How long is that flight going to be on the way home if you don't come away with the win? That's a real thing. That's a very real thing. And so I think Iowa State's in a great spot. If this what CBS puts out is the end all be all and proves to be right, I think you want to be in about that 8th spot with where Iowa State's rated. Now, obviously, you'd be 16. That'd be even better. But I think being 8, that's not bad. You're in a relatively decent spot. You are not in a bad spot with an 8th hardest rated schedule and being probably a top 5 team in the Big 12, at least, right? That gives you chances because you've got momentum. You can build off of wins. You can go into games where you probably shouldn't win and you walk away with a dub. And that's what sets good teams from great teams apart. I think Iowa State can get that done this season. I really do. Let me know what you think down below or at Twitter or on Twitter at Nick_Marv. This is interesting. Kelly Ford, I just don't agree with those. They are stats. I can't say that someone's wrong per se. I just think Iowa State's going to prove those statistics to be inaccurate. Let's put it that way. What do you think? And do they have the 8th hardest schedule? Because I think that's pretty accurate. I really do. Be sure to hit subscribe. It's completely free and we're proving it's a Cyclone State. Until next time, Cyclone fans, stay safe out there.